Welcome back to the lab. New project. It's a Lotus / Chatham 7 sports car, kit car / replica thing. There'll be a specific model that it actually is, but they're all pretty similar. There's differences, right? But this one is, excuse me, a project our customer's father started a number of years ago, so they're keen to get it going. I'm not sure if it's ever actually run. It's been definitely a long way assembled. I'm not sure if it's driven. It certainly hasn't been on the road, and it probably won't unless the roads are closed. We're going to build it as a motorsport type vehicle, or at least that's the plan at this point in time. So initially what I'm tasked with doing is some things like fitting some guards, making those work on the vehicle, tidying up some of the frames and stuff just to make it more better, with a little bit of a modern touch on it perhaps. Not knocking anything that was done here. This is all done by somebody who's not a car fabricator, etc. And following plans and instructions from many moons ago. This is not something that's happened in the last decade. This is a couple of decades, I believe, or maybe even more. Long time in the build. So there's a expensive pile of, it's only a tiny pile, isn't it? It's $360 worth of steel just there. I'm not kidding you. That's the way things are going in New Zealand at the moment, and that's what I paid for it. It's not necessarily what retail would be. So stuff's getting expensive. But anyway, we've got some bits like this, which there would have been a good reason for it at the time. We're not sure what that was now. So this piece here will get chopped out and replaced with a new piece of steel. There's a bit on the back there that the owner hasn't mentioned, but I've noticed is a bit hard to see on the camera. Perhaps that's quite bent. The middle of that's probably 10 millimeters down from where it should be. There's only 4 welds attaching that to the chassis, and it's something that's going to be right there for your eyes to see, so we might as well get that right. And in these, in the general area of these top shock mounts, will be some plates going on for our main hoop, for our roll hoop. And then, so that's a section, the larger tube that's here, 44, it'll be this one. And then that's 38, and that's for our back stays, which will go from our main hoop, which won't be very tall. It goes in between here and here, and we'll run the back stays down to that bar that I've just mentioned before that is bent. So we'll put a straight one on there and some reinforcing plates, etc. And then there's a lot of other stuff and things. We're going to change the engine mount arrangement and do something a little bit nicer with the steering shaft perhaps. We'll look into that and make sure it's kosher either way. It's not going to be a chrome plated polished aluminium build. It's going to be a have some fun with the guys' kids build. But we will make it look nice. Right, so I'll roll it forward. The march is currently being a ceiling today. For the next little while, it's just easier to have it there, up out of the way, and we'll work on this one on the floor. Is easy enough. Plane of attack, you can see that now. You can see that's quite bent. I want to do that one. I want to do the one on the dash, and I want to start chopping things out. And at some point during the week / weekend, we'll get some more pieces for this. We'll get some engine, we'll get some gearbox, and we'll get stuff and things, and we'll start figuring out what we need to change and what we don't, and ultimately we'll get this all powder coated and looking all nice. Suddenly it was Monday the following week, and this actually doesn't look like anything's happened apart from you saw all these bits. Nothing. There's been a lot of phone calls going on, and we've been talking about hitting our head on the march as we go under, talking about stuff and things. So I started making some chickens or doves or something. These little birds. Anyway, if you haven't guessed what those are for yet, they're for the seats. So I'm making some seats for it because you can get some from overseas, and I'm not knocking the ones from overseas. It's just there's a lot of ocean between here and there, and it's very expensive ocean now. So rather than buying stuff that was available, nothing that we can get in New Zealand easily actually fits into the car, but these do. And even a big, I'm not fat really, I'm a big boy, but even Glenn, it's, what am I? 6 foot and 90 kgs. I can fit in those, and these fit in the car. So they're not made to be light, they're made to fit and be comfortable. And they're not designed to support themselves 100% either. They are designed so that that will be supported by this. That bolts directly to the floor, and that bolts directly to the floor across the front there. Now, I haven't discussed with the customer, but I'm thinking we're going to put a bracket on the back of this that is flat and has a set of multiple holes on it, and then we'll put multiple holes in the floor for each attach point, and that'll allow you to move this backwards and forwards, whatever. It'll depend on how many holes we put in and how long this bracket is that's out of here. And then other people will be able to drive it. But see, the challenge we have is we've got to put harness bolts. There's a hole, doesn't line up quite the same through the lens as what it does through my eyes. There's a hole there. And there's another one, we might be able to see the back side of the nut down in there. This is probably going to have to be redone a little bit. I'm not really sure that's enough to hold a harness, probably isn't. So we have to get a harness down here beside the seat, which is why these are scalloped out like that. This is not satisfactory in my opinion. You're quite likely to put a very large ouch in your hip or something if there's a incident. So I'll do something a bit better with that. It might involve welding a threaded boss into here or something like that, so that we're not so that we don't have to have a bolt head hanging out this side where the passengers are going to be. So we're that far. You can get a harness down there and down there. Adjusting it might be a bit tricky, but whatever. And of course we've got the hole in the front here for your crutch strap. There's no attach point underneath there that has to go in. And the shoulder straps are going to go onto the roll bar, which actually ends up being really high based on where you're sitting in the car. And there's some materials for that there. So I'll crack on. I'll get this other seat made. Made in-house, obviously, by myself. Reasonably happy with how that's come out. I guess if we put a whole heap of holes in it, it'd just make it weaker. It wouldn't achieve anything. And then it's a bomber style seat, I guess. But that's not really a thing for these cars. So, alrighty, let's carry on. It's a few days later, and suddenly we've got a engine in there. A few of you guys have been asking on Facebook what the engine is going to be. That's the same engine that was fitted to the car originally. Clearly it's a Ferrari V12 twin turbo with chain drive, or maybe it's not. And apparently, according to my mate who's a bit of a Toyota guru, we have to delete the E from that because it's carbureted, not fuel injected. So the E was to do with electronic fuel injection, and it does not have any more, and most likely won't unless we go to refurbish these carbs and find there's prohibitive costs or whatever, and the owner decides to go full cray and put EFI back on it with individual throttle bodies, and that would be quite cool, wouldn't it? Individual throttle bodies and coil on plug setup. Delete the distributor and just put a sensor on it. Would be awesome, but not really any need for it. You want to kind of keep it simple, right? That doesn't need any form of computer to run it. Just some sort of ignition module thingy, whatever it needs for the Dizzy to make that go. That's it. thermo switch to run the radiator fan, which clearly is not here at the moment. And that's about it, really. Everything else is just simple as we like it. So the original arrangement for the engine mounts was a bit... it had these things on it. And these things, they come apart quite easily, like that. They tear to bits when they get a bit old and yucky. And then you've got an engine sitting in the front of a car that's not very well supported. So what I'm going to do is probably leave those original factory mount brackets exactly as they are and do nothing to those. So we'll have that single stud on there to remove those and the 4 bolts off the block. And we've been seeing our mates at the mount shop shaking it around because I'm trying to get it the right way around for you. We'll put some top hat bushes in a bit of roll cage tube, happens to be the right size to work with these, and make some nice... We'll cut all this off. Not that there's anything particularly wrong with it, but it's just not going to work nicely. So we'll cut all that off and we'll make some new mounts and put the engine in the right spot. I know, looking at it from here, people will be like, it's crooked, it doesn't go like that. But I can assure you that is exactly the angle that the engine needs to go on. Because if we look down here, you might be able to see it. The sump is designed for the engine. Let's come right down here. For the engine to be on a little bit of an angle. So you can see the bottom of the sump there is... doesn't look so much so on the phone, is pretty much perfectly flat. We do need to come up just a tiny little bit on the left hand side here. The side here needs to come up just the tiniest little bit, but that is the angle that the engine is designed to sit on, more or less. It's a bit odd, isn't it? But that's pretty common. A lot of manufacturers do that. So I'll get on, get these engine mounts done, confirm where we are with our transmission mount, which probably looks okay. That's going to work. There's no sense in replacing it if we don't have to. It looks like everything will be fine there. So I'll get that done, and then once that's done, I can confirm what we're doing with all sorts of other things. This pedal box area, it doesn't look like we can really gain anything here at all, but I'll try. I'll figure something out and get us some more space for our feet. And with the transmission tunnel, looks like there's actually a bit of scope for narrowing that up a little bit to allow just a little bit more room for the driver and the passenger, since we haven't got the seats mounted yet. See, pretty clever, eh? Thinking about these things. We'll be able to scoot the seats inwards just a tiny little bit if we make that tunnel narrower, which should be pretty good. Okay. That motor, just in case anyone's got any queries with the Weber side drafts on there, should probably be good for about 120, 130 horsepower, something around that sort of area. They can make 200 horsepower with some trickery, work them up quite extensively. You'll make really good power with them. 200 horsepower and something like this weighs 500 kgs would be pretty scary, but good fun at 120, 130. Right, that took way longer than what I thought it would to delete the original mounting brackets and stuff that were on the chassis there, but it's done. And there's no holes in the chassis. Tubes ready to go. So tomorrow I will crack on with that because it's 5:30 and I'm sure the neighbours are sick of the grinders. It took a good couple of hours solid work to chop those out. Not that they would have been particularly strong with the design anyway, but I'm going to put a big plate on the top here. Probably 3mm plate will do the trick. Cover that hole, you know, spread it out over as much as we can realistically, and possibly even something onto this diagonal here, down to there. Give it some guts. There's I keep looking at it and noticing there's something just not quite right And this front end here, the engine's right, that's how that sits, as I explained earlier on. You might be able to just see it there that the bottom of the sump is level, that's how the engine goes. This corner here, if I hold the phone level to the dash there, that should be level with the bottom of the screen, and it's not. There's something a bit funny there, and you can see there's a dent. That's the side that was a little bit too long. So I wonder if someone figured that out, that was a little bit too long on that corner and tried to make it shorter and dented the tube. I'll figure that out. Yeah, you can see, if you look at that compared to the steering rack, compared to the next frame back, she's all wonky there. And even the steering arms, this one's down a bit of an angle, that's almost up. So we've got to get that right, or the car will handle funny on bumps. So we don't want to spend hours and hours on it, but don't want to waste money on powder coating and stuff and not have things like that, at least so, you know, eyeball it straight. Cool. Actually looks a heck of a lot better just putting the motor in it, doesn't it? Suddenly looks like a car. Heaps of progress. Heaps. I did do the plate as per what I suggested I was going to do. Plate onto those bottom two. That's a rail. That's, I don't know what we'll call that, a stringer. It's not an aircraft, but never mind, that'll do. Didn't come up onto the side here. Didn't think there was much point in that. Obviously that bolt's too long. That'll be replaced. Retained the original mount bracket. Added some bits onto it. Put my tube with the bush inside it, with another tube inside that so it doesn't get crushed. This is all 3mm. Yeah, it's probably going to have a little bit of a weak point across there, right, where it's hard to show you, where the bracing on the side stops. You could, in theory, bend it here on both sides, but by the time you've done that, there's been some significant trauma going on, and it's probably better to bend and break this than to bend and break this down here. So both sides are done except for this weld on the other side there, along this edge of the chassis rail. Obviously with the motor in the way, that's a bit hard to do, so that'll come out and we'll finish that. I popped down the road, got ourselves a second-hand radiator. It's actually out of a Nissan Caravan from our mates at Nissan King. Chopped it up to make it the right width. We have got a steering shaft that runs through here, so we can't go any wider than what that is there. It's about, it might be a bit more, 400 wide and about 450 high. Double core radiator, so it's double thickness. That'll be heaps for this motor. They're only 120, 130 horsepower, as I might have said earlier on, so a radiator that size is heaps. I'll have the radiator back probably a little bit further than what it is there, so that we've got heaps of room to put a nice big fan on it. We'll probably fit a 14-inch fan on the front of that, I would think. There's not really the room to put the fan on the back and then move the radiator forward, and then the height starts becoming an issue anyway to get it's way over there, the nose cone onto the front of the car and have it looking nice. Speaking of looking nice, main coil feed wire into the distributor, we'll have to do a 90-degree one to keep this down low profile. She's sitting pretty tall, as you can see. That'll be a bit of a headache, so yeah, a low profile one of those and we'll be away. Now, distributor's been tokenerized apart. All the bits are missing because wanted to make sure of what we had and whether it was usable or not. I will be upgrading. I haven't actually spoken to the owner about that. We'll chuck in a better coil. These are like, the old coils are like 15,000 volts or something. This is like a zillion, trillion, billion, 50,000 volts or something like that. Quite a lot more. More betterer, and then we get rid of that ballast resistor that you might be able to, you can't see it, can you? You can see it now. Ballast resistor. They tend to give problems. So we'll get rid of that and make all that stuff go better. Carburetors have been off and not 100% apart, but apart enough that I can blow out all the crud that's in them, all the dust and all that sort of carry on. At this point, probably just see how it runs with them as they are. If there's any issues with crud in there, we'll have to clean it out some more. Some of the screws, idle bleed air screws, were seized and that, but they're not now. Everything's pretty good. You can see oil tray underneath it, drain tray, that's what I was trying to say, with oil in it. So I've drained the oil out of the engine. It actually looked really good, really clean. Put a new oil filter on it. Old one, it's over here. Box on stock right going in there. Look, it's all rusty. There's actually, I'm not sure we'll see it. There's rust on the inside of it as well that I noticed. You get an oil filter that looks like that, and you fire up the motor, and it'll blow a hole in it. It'll have a pinhole spring out, and all the oil will fall out of your motor and make a mess. So for $9 million that an oil filter costs these days, that actually just needs to be drained and thrown in the bin. We'll put a new one on it. There's some oil to go in here, make that good. Had the cam cover off, made sure everything was good in there. All the spark plugs have been out. It's been cranked over to make sure we've got at least some compression on all the cylinders, etc. All that's all pretty good. Bright red thing there, that's an oil pressure switch. It didn't have one before, it had a bolt. So now we can put a light on the dash, not a gauge, just a light, which is, they can upgrade that later if they want, but for now, just for what I'm doing with stuff, I want to know that it actually has oil pressure. So that's the easiest way to do that, nice and cheap. Just put a bulb, run some power into that, ground it there, done, easy. So that'll do for now. It does actually, like I say, it looks heaps better just putting a motor in it, right? Heaps better. Cool. All right, thanks for watching. We'll carry on with this one, and we'll see where we get to. That is nearly at the point where it might go soon.